bear with me. So I guess we will call to order at 6:04 p.m. May I ask Mr. Grivich for the Pledge of Allegiance?
It's a little awkward. I don't have a flag in my vicinity, but I can do it plain verbally. If you join after me, we'll stand up. It'll be a little hard to see us, but that's okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Grivich. We'll move on to the roll call.
Marcia Solario.
Present.
David Lynn.
Here.
Dario Castellanos.
Here.
Donna Chia.
Present.
Rosario Diaz. Rosario Diaz. Jim Grivich.
Here.
Colleen Rosati.
Here.
All present.
We'll move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Let's start first with the June 3rd, 2020 Finance and Audit Committee meeting minutes. Did anyone on the committee have any questions or comments on these minutes?
Madam Chair, Colleen Rosati.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's more of a comment on the minutes for the 3rd of June. It was just clarification more so. On page 4, you actually asked Marcia a question about the animal control and the big decrease in revenue and the increase in expenses. And Mark said that they were looking into other options. And I was just wondering, did you ever get a response to that? Did we ever find out what the status was? That's question number 1.
What I recall, I have not received an update on that.
Okay, maybe city manager will be able to enlighten us. And then the other question you did ask was about police department and the account. Marcia Solario asked a question about police department and states the accounts seem a bit heavy, and city manager states that police chief was not on the call, but he'd get back to her on a question you had regarding the police department. Did you ever get a response to that?
No, I did not.
Okay. Maybe we need to follow up on those if it's still important for you to find those answers to those questions. And then just real quick on the minutes. Oh, okay. That's what I have for the 3rd. I have questions for the 11th as well.
Any other questions for the minutes on the 3rd? No? Okay. Do we need to do a motion to approve these minutes before we go on to the next ones? Or approve them both together?
Let's approve the first one, please.
Okay.
Who made the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, I'll second.
So David Lynn made the motion and Dario second?
That's correct.
Yep, correct.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No, it's approved. Okay, we will move on to the June 11, 2020 Finance and Audit Committee special meeting minutes. Any comments or questions? Ms. Rosati.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me, on minutes for the 11th of June on page 3, we were anticipating a copy of the draft contract from the fire department that had to do with LA County. Did we ever get a copy of that? That's a question.
Okay, I don't believe we did. The last we spoke, it was being routed for review, and then received no update after that. So we will need to follow up with that request.
Okay. Madam Chair, the reason I brought this up is because in the past, when we've reviewed minutes, I know that there's a couple things that I brought up. One was an IT issue, that there was problems with IT and that the person was supposed to get back to us and didn't. And I guess my concern is that, excuse me, we asked these questions and we're told that we're going to be getting follow-up and copies of things, and it kind of just falls off into a bisque, which is, as we move forward in tonight's meeting, something that the state audit has reflected upon. So I think moving forward, as far as our committee is concerned, just throwing this out there as a suggestion, that when we ask questions or have concerns or would like documents, that we follow up and make sure that we get them, because it could impede on a decision we have to make down the road. So that's why I'm just asking if anybody got copies or responses to those questions that were asked at those two last meetings.
I agree. That's a great suggestion. Let me reach out to the committee really quick. Did anybody receive any documents in regards to these items on the minutes?
Nope.
No.
It'll be a note for whoever's assigned chair today. Moving forward, that we follow up on our items in a more timely fashion. So thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, we'll put a system in place to follow up on those. I'll make sure of it.
Who's saying that?
Dario.
Daria,
Oh, okay. Thanks, Dario.
you're welcome.
Okay, can I have a motion to get, oh, sorry, is there any more questions on June 11 minutes? Hearing
No
none, can I
questions.
get a motion for approval?
Mr. Statement, I'll make a motion.
I'll second it again.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, they're approved. Thank you. We'll move on to reports. So item number 3, Finance and Audit Committee nominations. Tonight's meeting, we have to nominate a chair and a vice chair. So we will start with the chair.
I have a question before we proceed.
Yes.
Normally, at least in the past, we've done these things in June. The what I call the reorganization meeting, and this is January, and I guess I'm asking a general question about procedure or timelines. When should this take place? When is this committee reconstituted? Because I noticed when the council reappointed new members to the committee, it seemed to be that the term started in January, which is not the way it's been in the past. So I'm trying to find out the timeline structure of this committee. If the city manager, perhaps, because I'm not sure what's going on with this.
Jim, can I speak up for a second? So when this committee was, Colleen Rosati, when this committee was formed in 2016, you're correct, it was about May or June that the rotation should have occurred, and it had been occurring about that time. If you look at the minutes for June 3rd, and I was going to bring this up, there was a notation that a new chair should have been nominated at that point. And it was said it would be postponed to the next meeting, which was June 11th. And for some reason, it got overlooked. So if we would have been on the timeline, which you're speaking of, we would have been an appropriate timeline for now, but we didn't. So there wasn't follow through with appointing the new chair. In fact, I think I brought that up to Robin when we had the meeting with the fire department, or maybe it was before, that it was coming soon. So you're right. You're absolutely right. It should be in June.
Well, I guess I'm trying to find out if something has changed about the terms, and because
Jim, let me intervene here. I think we could discuss that like later. It's something I'm sure we could resolve pretty easily, and I think we should move the meeting along. This not deciding that right now is not agendized, but we could discuss it later and figure that out. I think we could, discuss it with the council about, do we revert back to starting, mid-year, or do we leave it this way, and how often we hold the meetings. I think we could do that later. Are you okay with that?
Well, I would be uncomfortable with proceeding with an election until we figure out what our calendar is. That was what I was trying to say, maybe not very clearly, but
okay. Okay.
So I'm comfortable with Marcia staying chair until we know how long her term is. You know what I'm trying to say? And
I get what you're trying to say. Well, we could just go back to, we could, I guess, as a committee today decide, do we want to vote on it today, or do we want to postpone it for next meeting?
Well, supposedly the next meeting may not be until March. So Dave Lynn is your co-chair. And while you don't have to use that pecking order necessarily to have the co-chair move to chair, sometimes that is what happens. So my personal opinion is we've extended it long enough. And I think that what Jim is trying to allude to is that we do a new chairman and a new vice chair. And I think postponing it, that's why things never get done, is we just keep postponing it and putting things on the back burner, and we're going to look into it, and there's no follow-up, with all due respect.
Okay, so I think if there's no opposition, we could do it today. I mean, I don't think, would anyone be opposed to doing that today?
Doing the chair and the co-chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people were planning on it because it has been agendized.
Okay, then let's do that.
I think Jim's fear is just that now is setting a new precedent that now we'll just be doing the new rotation every January as opposed to in June. And so if this is what's going to happen, maybe that's why the hesitation.
I see what you're saying, Marcia. So, City Manager, do you have a comment on that?
Yes.
As to should the chairmanship start in June when it should have been done, or should it start now in January?
The council approved the appointments, and if I could say this, they were appreciative that everyone reapplied and they wanted the committee to continue as constituted. So this was approved at the city council meeting on the 19th, and I can look up the term. I'm assuming it's a 1-year term or 2-year term from that date, but I would think you could tonight reconstitute the offices, the chairman, etc. I would recommend you do that.
Thank you, Dave. So moving forward, we need a nomination for a chair.
Yes, let's start with nominations for the chair, please.
Okay, I'd like to nominate co-chair Dave Lynn as chairman.
Do I hear a second?
second.
I'll second that.
Let me get a roll call.
Marcia Solorio,
I forgot what we say. Yes.
David Lynn,
Yes.
Jim Grivich,
Yes.
Colleen Rosati,
Yes?
Donna Chia,
Yes.
Dario Castellanos,
Yes.
Rosario Diaz.
I think she might have to be let into the meeting because she was having trouble connecting. So I texted her to hang up and try again. Is there a way to check that?
She's there. I let her in.
Rosario, can you hear us? She can. She sent me a screenshot of her phone that shows, please wait, the meeting host will let you in soon.
I let her in. It says Galaxy S9 on my screen.
Okay, let me ask her if she can hear us.
Perhaps she needs to check the microphone on her screen to talk.
Okay, well, let's continue. She missed that, so she wouldn't really know what we're discussing. I'll fill her in on this later, but hopefully she can join us. No, she says she can't hear, but she could see everyone.
Ask her maybe to put a headset on, plug it into her phone. Sometimes that works.
Okay, I'm letting her know. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to add her to this call via my cell phone. Give me a moment, please.
Okay.
Hello? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay. Rosario has joined us through my cell phone.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Rosario. This is Marcia. We're voting on David Lynn becoming the chair. So we're doing roll call.
Okay.
Your last vote.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. There we go.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Congratulations, David.
Thank you.
We move on to vice chair. Do I have any nominations?
This is David. I would like to nominate Asha to be vice chair. I think she's been doing a very good job in past year, leading the meeting discussions and the coordination. So I would like to nominate Masha.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Marcia Solario,
Yes.
David Lynn,
Yes.
Dario Castellanos,
Aye.
Donna Chia,
Yes.
Rosario Diaz,
Aye.
Jim Grivich,
Aye.
Colleen Rosati.
Aye.
Thank you.
At the time I was made chair, it happened immediately. So should I pass the gavel on to David right now to
Yes.
take over the meeting? Okay.
Yes.
David,
Yeah.
you're up.
Okay. Wow.
Congratulations, Chair.
Thank you. Please correct me. So I believe we have already covered 3 items on the agenda. Is our plan to go over the corrective action plan as shared with the committee?
Is it possible to reshuffle these topics to maybe leave the state to the end, since it's probably going to be the more detailed one, this recommendation? I don't know if I'm allowed to do that.
Sure. I guess we can start with the state audit report and then move on to the more generic corrective action plan, and then eventually get into the financial recovery plan. So to start with the state audit report, does anyone have any questions or concerns for the state audit report? If not, I guess we'll move into the corrective action plan. I guess I can go first on this one. I do have a question for the city staff. So I understand that the corrective action plan for the state audit was already approved by the city council and subsequently sent to the state auditor on January 21st. However, I'm a little bit curious as to why this plan didn't go through the finance and audit committee for review and discussion first before the submission to city council. Were we under a separate deadline that I was not aware of other than the July 1st to submit something to the state?
Good evening, David, commissioners. Our committee terms had lapsed, and so it took some time to get back on the agenda, the reappointment, which occurred on the 19th. The state wanted the corrective action plan returned to them as a first of two steps. And so we sent that in so we could comply with the state deadline. The committee wasn't constituted, so couldn't meet. We didn't, the terms had expired, et cetera. So we got that reconstituted. The key, though, is the next part, which is the financial recovery plan. I guess the first is the corrective action plan, which is an acknowledgement of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then the meat, the substance of it, is the financial recovery plan, which is the document that we're looking at tonight.
When I was reviewing the more granular plan, which is the financial recovery plan, I'm under the impression that a status report will be submitted on a monthly basis to the state. I'm wondering if I can, on behalf of the Finance and Audit Committee, to request a copy of the monthly status report going forward as soon as the update begins.
If I may, the deadline for the financial recovery plan is June 2021. We want
Right.
to have that in place. So we thought we would get this out in January so we could be working on this and have it submitted ahead of that deadline. And then the state auditor asked that the city council be informed quarterly of the city's progress in implementing this plan that you're looking at tonight. It's a quarterly look.
So with the last column labeled with status report, parenthesis, updated monthly, is this more like an internal process?
It is, and a number of the things on that list are underway and require a staff level meeting monthly. The city management is asked by the state to inform the city council quarterly against it. So this document is interesting for a number of reasons, the substance of it, but also the format. The state was unable to provide any templates or any examples or no, they didn't know of any city who had actually drafted such a thing. And so we're put this together in a very simple format that we could get to work on it. And it's a little pedestrian looking tonight. I guess we could add snap, crackle, and pop to it later in terms of formatting of it. But I think the heart of it is the action steps against the objectives. So that was the intention tonight, that we'd look at those things.
Question on the format, since we're talking about that. I counted a total of 14 recommendations / bullet points throughout the report. But the financial recovery plan is separated into 9 topics. Can you tell us a little how you group them together to become these 9? Or did you choose the top 9, the more serious ones?
Those were the ones that the state had given us. So that it's the state's top 9.
Thank
I'm quibbling a little bit, but the state actually had 10. One of them was the thing that's up at the top, which is description.
Thank you, Jim. You are right. We added that one at the top because it says description of intended corrective actions, timing, prioritization of resources, identification of individuals responsible for monitoring. So I think that was the introduction to this document. We weren't trying to take anything off the list. We just put it at the very top.
Okay, so I guess I will throw this question for the committee members here. Are we interested in getting these informal report on a monthly basis, or are we okay with getting it whenever it becomes available at the next quarter?
Well, I'm interested in a monthly report, since a lot of these expected.
We lost you, Jim.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm not on mute. I don't understand why you can't hear me.
I can hear you, Jim.
We can hear you now.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay.
We can hear you.
What I was
I can hear
trying.
you.
Okay. What I was trying to say is I would be interested in seeing anything that is sent to the council. This committee should be seeing anything that's. I'm getting cut off.
I can hear you.
So I don't know the precise timeline. Can you hear me? Can you hear what I'm saying? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. I don't know the precise timeline, but this thing has expected completion dates roughly starting in March 1st. And I would hope that this committee could review whatever's prepared on March 1st. And I was hoping that the next meeting could be at that time. That's not 3 months, that's 2 months, or a month and a half, actually. So I don't know. I think it's important, since this is the audit and it is the city's response, that we need to be involved step by step.
Any other opinion from other fellow members?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Grivich. Just if we have time, I had some issues on quite a few of the steps. I think it was a good start, but I don't, as an auditor and someone that writes these and reviews them all the time, so I apologize. I feel like the point of an action plan is to address the recommendation, state what you're going to say, right? You identify a completion date and responsible staff, which is great. But in the steps, I'm not feeling like they're really addressing the core issues or the core recommendations. So if this can't be edited or updated, I think it's going to be very important for the committee to be on top of this and get as much updates as possible. So, which would go back to David's recommendation of being kept in the loop on the monthly update.
Marcia, I'd like to support what you just said. I sent an email earlier. Why is what's going on? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I agree with what Marcia just said.
Okay.
Like
can
it's really sweet. Like for example, like number 2, we're talking about review, evaluate, and monitor all city contracts. But the action step is, okay, we're going to make a list of the contracts, verify some insurance is current, and evaluate the effectiveness and work quality. Well, that's not really what the report said. The report said, aside evaluating it, we need to look at contract language and make sure that it's the proper contract language is there. So are we going to implement a tracking form? Many agencies use a tracking form to make sure it goes through legal and it goes through compliance and it goes through the department heads, whoever it needs to go through. based on the size of the contract and the type to ensure that we don't use evergreen clauses if it's not appropriate, that we don't, we ensure that we have all the required information if it's federally funded, things like that. So that's just one of the examples just from within this whole plan.
I'll try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I wrote an email earlier. What's happening? Every time I start talking, I get cut off.
No, we can still hear you.
Okay. I wrote an email earlier today that said each of these need a step called data analysis. And did you hear that?
Yes.
And that's kind of what Marcia's saying. There needs to be guts. Nobody else is talking. I don't understand what's going on.
We're listening. We're listening to you.
Okay. Anyway, I think every one of them needs an action step called data analysis. Marcia alluded to the contract. You have to deal with the guts of the contracts, how much they cost, how long they last, whether options were considered. Was there an RFP? Were there other vendors considered? All those things that you're supposed to do in a contract process. That should be part of this. The data analysis of what's needed to do it properly. Somebody needs to make a template. Marcia alluded to a template. That's for contracts. I did one on the fire department. You need basic data on how many fires actually are there. I was very disturbed at the last council meeting when the fire chief didn't even know how many times it happened when one of the council person asked the question, how many times was it that the city couldn't respond to a 911 call? The fire chief didn't know the answer. We have to have basic data to make any kind of analysis of any of this stuff. How many advanced life support, how many basic life support, those kinds of things. You can't analyze, there's been proposed several times, for example, that perhaps what we need is more rescue ambulances and fewer fire engines because there's hardly any fires and there's a lot of calls for medical emergencies. Well, to respond to that kind of suggestion, there needs to be data analysis. We don't have any data. And if we're going to consider options, we should be looking at that. I could go down these one by one and talk about the data that's needed for each one of them, but I think the point is that should be an action step, and that each of these has to have that phase done, and it needs to be done quickly because you can't really do much else unless you're looking at what the situation is in each of these areas.
And I think at the 1,000-foot level, when you read the report, ultimately it really goes back to what our financial audit said, was that we need more staffing in the finance department to be able to address a lot of these issues.
Well, certainly the ones that have to do with finance, absolutely.
For Robin, I don't want her to see for all of these.
Either that or we need a consultant to do the work. I mean, it can be done that way too, but somebody needs to do it.
Thank you, Jim and Marcia. So regarding Jim's request of data analysis for Mr. Carmody and Ms. Burr, is that something that you can commit to at today's meeting, or is that something you will have to take it offline and provide a follow-up response at a later date?
I think it's important that we set the staff and set the committee up for success. My intention tonight was that we'd hear all your suggestions and that we'd go back and work on this. And I know the committee is going to be meeting again, I assume quarterly. So I heard somebody say they wanted to meet monthly, et cetera. I don't see that as being realistic. But what we want to do is in this thing, introduce multiple levels of accountability. That seemed to be one of the major themes of the state. And I would welcome that suggestion and any others that any other committee member has as we go down the list here. I don't think we need motions, but I just would hope we could have a dialogue and all of your suggestions about this draft report, which we want to have ship shape by late June, 1st of July. So Jim, point noted, I hear you, and we'll be working on this. Thank you for that suggestion.
So, Chairman Lynn, Colleen Rosati. So, Dave, if I'm hearing you correctly, you would like some suggestions as to what direction this committee could go towards. Is that correct?
That'd be helpful. Sure.
Okay. So, in reading and I'm sorry, I may be backpedaling. In reading the state audit, I saw a common thread that kind of went through the report, and that was quality control, risk management issues, revenue spending, reserve funds, employee costs, accountability, taking ownership, follow through, contracts and how they're negotiated. Are they negotiated in the best interest of the city, in the best interest of the residents, or in the best interests of political leadership? So my thought process was, where do we go from here after getting this report? And I think a lot of these issues can be turned around. As I've stated, we need to strategize a plan for each department, similar to what Jim and Marcia have just mentioned, which will require buy-in from each of the departments, the heads, department heads, and the staff. And I think as a committee, as a suggestion, we should collaborate together using all of our strengths. Start with the most at risk, cost effective, and create obtainable goals. And Dave alluded to that can be measured. Create obtainable deadlines. And I think most importantly is ownership needs to be taken and have accountability and commitment to follow through. And that's one of the reasons I kind of brought, as trivial as it was, about the minutes. You know, when we ask for things, reports, or have questions, and we've been told that we're going to get a response and we don't, we move on to other things. We're all busy. And I think that's the critical point. This is a suggestion I'd like to make on how we proceed, maybe form subcommittees of those of us that may be better at reviewing contracts, take on that project. Those of us who have more experience with cost sharing, that was another issue that was on the state audit. Prioritize the city's resources, maybe someone's better at that. Review internal process or operational procedures, most at risk, and the reduction of financial waste and possible fraud, etc. Those are just some suggestions. And I think it's been said universally throughout the community, and I think this committee is highly respected. I think we all bring something to the table, and I don't think we're being fully utilized. So as a recommendation, I think maybe taking little chunks of it and creating a plan, and not make it so daunting and overwhelming, but start with, as I mentioned, what is most at risk that we need to look at. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Colleen. Any other suggestions or questions from anyone else?
David?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
could,
Go ahead, Mr. Comany.
I had really hoped, and if you look back to the state audit report, page 19, it gives us some direction in terms of how this thing is to be created and how it's supposed to run, what it's for, how it's supposed to work. The number one theme, if anybody's got that report, it's right there on page 19, is that we can introduce all of these multiple layers of accountability. When we put this together, one of the things we talked about was we don't want to get guilty of saying we'll do everything tomorrow, because we're in the midst of a global pandemic, we're in the midst of audit, we're in the midst of budget preparation for the coming year. So clearly everything can't be a priority one. And we also wanted to assign, in terms of the staff side, who would be the lead. Because we said, well, everyone's responsible for that. It really means to me that no one is. I would suggest for tonight, Mr. Chairman, that we just go through this list 1 through 9, hear any initial comments, suggestions, recommendations. Let us do some more work on this as we refine it and bring it back in time for the next meeting, 3 months, whenever that is. So if we could just start with number 1, talk about fees, which was a key issue. They wanted us to have the fees be recouped and be based on cost reasonably borne in service provision. If any committee member has suggestions about this approach, this would probably be a good time to hear that. So could we start with number 1, move to number 2, etc.?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay.
Is there any way the host can share the report on the screen so that everybody can follow along? I'm just wondering.
It isn't what you meant.
Does everybody have a copy, either hard copy or soft copy handy right now so that we can follow?
I have one in front of me, paper.
Okay. Colleen, Marsha?
I have hard copy.
Colleen, do you have a copy?
Are we talking about the attachment number 2?
No. We're talking about the financial recovery plan, which has 9 things on the playlist.
City
Dave,
of what?
Dave, I sent you a message. Can you please check it, your phone?
Yeah.
Because I think they sent me the wrong stuff. I have an initial risk management evaluation.
That's an attachment. So
Okay, and then I've got this. So I sent you a copy on your phone. I photocopied it. I mean, not photocopied it. I took a screenshot.
We can get to those, but so we can get all on the same sheet of music.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't have what you're talking about.
Maybe
These
I
are
could
the 2
email
things.
it to you right now. If we were in the same room, I would just
Okay.
hand it to you, but I
Well-
could email it over.
Okay.
Donna, you good?
I'll just plug along.
No, I want to get it to you right away, Colleen.
Oh, it's fine.
This is
Valerie is trying to figure out how to share it on the screen, but we haven't done it before. I'm not sure we'll figure it out tonight.
Zoom is awkward with respect to
everyone
document
that
sharing.
loves Zoom meetings, will you raise your hand?
My family switched to another software that can do documents because this is awkward and with this software.
As long as you have the document open, you should be able to press the green at the bottom share screen, and you'll just pick which window you want it to share. You should be good to go. I think you have to like save it on your desktop and then open it. It's really weird.
So in the email I just sent all of you, the attachment that's called Financial Recovery Plan with Attachments is the one that you should open, and this Financial Recovery Plan is at the very top of that stack. It's got items 1 through 9.
Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yep, yes, we can see it.
Oh, thank you, Valerie. Bless your heart.
You're welcome.
Anyway, I will start a comment with a fees assessment. The data analysis here is you have to have some idea what the fees are currently being charged, how much revenue is being generated, and how much it actually costs to do what's associated with that fee. And let me just pick one that I know about. If you get a building permit, I mean, we're charging residents a certain amount for building permits. We are, during the year we collect whatever the total of that charge is, and then it costs us a certain amount to administer that program. We need that basic data to do this objective. And that's what I meant by data analysis here.
I understand. So that's how these studies are done. Through the chair, if I may respond. The way these are approached is you get an analysis of all the things that are charged, and then you look into what's the cost of delivering that service. If it's a building permit, good example, I just got one this week from the city to replace windows at my house. I paid whatever that charge was, but the fee study would look into that and then would make a recommendation. It would be based on what's the city's cost in providing that service, and then it come back to the city council in the form of a recommendation for adjusting those fees to match. And that was a criticism of the state auditor. They thought the city's fees were too low, and so the city was subsidizing some of these services out of the general fund. That's exactly the kind of data you get in one of those fee studies. So there were several categories. One was the user fees. One was the development impact fees that developers pay for impacts upon administration and police and fire and parks and public works. That's development impact fees. I think we could also, in this recommendation on objective number 1 says we will look at the sewer maintenance district fees and the landscaping district fees. We seem to have high demands for citywide landscaping and not enough money to get things to standard. So a fee study will be a bit of a, cold water bath. We'll hear where those things should be set, and then there'll be some tough decisions about either subsidizing or not raising the fees to recover all of those costs. This then on the expected completion date says we would issue an RFP pretty quickly. March, we'd kick it off, we'd get it underway, and we'd get it adopted by the end of the calendar year. We put in the lead on this one, the finance director, and with support from all of the operating departments.
And I will add this, that for the committee to know, we already started fixing this process when we brought in our previous building and safety contractor. So we've already corrected a lot of the outdated fees. So we'll continue as is set forth in this draft report, but we'll, just so everyone knows, we did update a lot of those already.
Thank you, Dario. Shall we move on to the
number 2? Mr. Chair, is that what you were going to say? Should we move on to number 2?
Yes. Shall we please move on to number 2, please?
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions or suggestions for how we should go about reviewing, evaluating, and monitoring all the city contracts?
Well, the audit had a lot more detail on what was the issues with the contracts than is indicated under action steps. So I'm, like, for example, there needs to be a a competition process. They said that about a half a dozen times in different places for every contract. There needs to be a scope of work for every contract, and that should be an action step. In other words, let me talk about one that was just on the agenda for the council last meeting. There was a tree trimming contract. Well, there was some talk about we should trim all the trees once every 7 years or 5 years. Well, that's only one element. How many trees are there? I thought that was kind of an, and I mean,
About 25,000 trees. It's a lot of trees.
yeah, and how much do we pay versus other cities for this service? Or
That's a competitively bid service, so we recently shopped for that.
No, I'm not talking about that. It's very expensive. It's like $1 million a year or something.
Very expensive.
So let's take another city out there. I don't know. Covina. I'm just picking a name out of the hat. How much do they pay for tree trimming? My point is, we need a basis of comparison. Is our scope right? 25,000 trees sounds like a bit much, and I'm just saying it needs to be analyzed. For are we doing the right thing? And it also needs to be what I would refer to as evaluated. That's an action step. An action. For example, is the tree trimmer doing the right job? Is he actually doing the job? Does he actually deal with all the trees? I don't know.
Right, and that was just to respond to that. That is basically why that item was continued, because we're doing exactly all of that.
Right, I'm just saying it should be on this form as an action step. That's all I'm trying to say right now. I'm not talking about whether the city has been doing it or is doing it. I'm trying to say it needs to be on this form as an action step. That was my point of my talk.
Okay, point taken.
I will second everything Jim said. It really, whatever is on the report needs to be reflected properly, especially number 2. Yeah. And just to ask Dario, for the current process, do we use like a contractor evaluation form to document?
Well, that's one thing that we're talking to the contractors about, is how we can go about enforcing the contracts and getting a good scorecard, if you will, from them. So, in essence, yeah, that's what if we want to call it that, we can call it that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just if you need a template, I have one.
Sure, absolutely.
Through the chair,
Send it over, please.
I would welcome a template if you have one, Marcia. Thank you.
Marsha, may I request you to share your template with us all in the email?
Yes, I'll write it down as an item.
Thank you.
Shall we move on to item number 3 now?
Could I summarize what I think I've heard? We want to reflect more fully all of the suggestions of the state audit under contract evaluation and monitoring, and we want to add the thought of performance evaluation. Were there other things that I missed?
I suggested a competitive bidding thing, which is part of what the auditor said. In contract language, that's usually request for proposal.
Which is the process we follow, but you want us to articulate that here?
Yeah. Because I know there's I know there's contracts that just doesn't happen, and the auditor specifically called out the Athens contract as an issue.
Yeah, and Jim, just so you know, that is something that the entire council has been. And Dave could let you know this too, that we've been very vocal about making sure that going forward we're being cutthroat competitive. So yeah, definitely that's one of the things I'm going to make sure of, is that when we're negotiating in any way, shape, or form with anyone, that we're really going full throttle to get the best deal for the city. And as far as the Athens contract, I know it gets referenced in the audit, but I don't know if you recall, the previous council tried to dismantle that contract, but decided against it due to the repercussions that come from that. So we could use that as a lesson as going forward, how to negotiate better contracts. But continue, Jim. Anything else on that?
No, I as I said earlier, is just a point of getting that language on this document. That's all.
For sure, we will, and we're going to make sure we're really cutthroat.
Thank you, Jim. So now your item number 3, which is to set aside land sale revenue to compensate for any shortfall in revenue that the city experiences as a result of the effects of the pandemic on the 2020 to 21 budget. Does anyone have any questions or suggestions for this one?
I just have a comment to remind everybody on this one that the land held for resale is for the BKK land, and there's a stipulation I have been told that was made by the city council that when that bond proceeds or that sale of that land comes in, we're to pay off the proceeds of the 2004 bonds, which have now been combined with the 2018 bonds. It's about $9 million.
Thank you, Warren. If we're good on this one, then we'll move on to item number 4, which is to proactively mitigate risk and exposure to litigation through training and implementation of best practices related to risk management. Any questions on this one?
I would want to enrich the action plan. Most time when we're talking about risk, there is usually in my previous life it was usually called safety meetings, but there was I don't know if what the city has, but there was no indication of any formalized process here for the city staff to evaluate potential risk factors in the city's environment.
We do have. It's a good question. We recently joined JPIA. Are you familiar with them?
Yes. I'm just saying it isn't on the document. That was all I was trying to say.
Oh, okay. But just I'll fill you in. One of the things that we have done to that point is join JPIA, and they are getting us caught up with assessing all kinds of human resources and other risks. And as far as the litigation, one thing that I've been working on, actually had a meeting earlier today about this. I do monthly litigation meetings where we get together and discuss all the cases going on in the city and analyze how and why they got started, back, whenever it was, and try to put systems in place to avoid that kind of failure from occurring again in the future. So it is something that we're doing and constantly trying to figure out how to do it better.
Anyway,
but any suggestions are welcome. So continue.
Well, then I'm gonna. That was the front end of the issue, and the back end of the issue was something that the auditor mentioned, which is each year we budget X amount of money, and each year we spend way more than X amount of money, and perhaps that should be here as an action that in the future we will budget based on our historical experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's definitely our forecast should come as close as possible to what actually happened. So we'll definitely work on that.
Dario, back to your meetings you discussed. So it seems like it's more like a lessons learned approach. Are you noticing any trends, any like root causes that are obviously you're not going to mention, but is it helpful that you can identify a root cause and kind of maybe seeing the same issue over and over and they can address an action plan specifically to those causes?
Yeah, I mean, the types of lawsuits that exist, they're all over the place. They could range from, you know, somebody tripping and falling to sometimes we get hit with stuff from someone just driving through our city and something happens, like something flies in the window. So in the cases where it is correctable, absolutely, we're putting systems in place to prevent that from happening, whether it's record keeping, better record keeping in that department, or better training. I mean, that is one thing that in the past, when budgets were cut in the past, in our PD, for example, one of the things that suffers first is training. So we're doing our best to not cut corners in that regard and really keep everyone up to date in trainings in every department that reduce the liability or reduce the risk of losses to the city. So yeah, definitely those meetings that I'm having monthly are for that purpose, but also for the purpose of sometimes moving cases along quickly. If it's just going to be kind of like an unfortunate burn of money that just gets dragged on and on and on. So, like today, I asked, excuse me, I asked the attorneys to forward 3 of the cases to our closed session meetings for discussion with the council, because sometimes it's just not worth spinning our wheels and burning money. But I'll say this, that I'll knock on wood, we have seen somewhat of an improvement in not getting sued so much. I hope that continues, but that's our goal. But sometimes it's unpredictable because, sometimes people are just looking for a quick payday, and that is unfortunate.
And I think for the budget perspective, I agree with Jim that when we're at our budget time again, we'll make sure to note that the budget does look more realistic for the legal fees, and then we'll also kind of keep an eye out for any training budget line.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is David. I do have a question regarding some of the completion dates. So I've noticed that some of the expected completion date goes as far out as December 2022. So I guess my question is that something that we may have already run by the state auditor, that this is acceptable to them, or will we not be able to find out until June 1st after we submit this plan?
I would say on this area, proactively mitigate risk and exposure to litigation through training and implementation of best risk management practices. I would regard that action step number 3 as pretty aggressive and pretty optimistic. I shared with the committee this initial risk management evaluation, which was completed when we joined the CJPIA. It's got 63 things that are needing attention. Everything from lead-based paint to mold to the lack of a ADA transition plan. Given the amount of things that are out of focus and wrong and needing correction, this could end up being a multi-year effort if we stayed really focused. I'll give you a comparative example. When I became city manager in a town quite near here, I was there for 5 years as their manager. That city was being pipped out of the JPIA because they had a list which was not as bad as this. And at the end of the 5-year run, we had everything addressed and on a good path. We had claims down to 0 and lawsuits had gone away. We cut litigation to the absolute minimum. But to say that we're going to do 100% of these corrective actions by the end of 2022 is pretty aggressive. I don't frankly know that anyone's opinion about that is going to make that date any better. It's going to require us to stay focused.
Don't get me wrong on this one. I'm not necessarily opposing to the estimated completion date here.
Yeah.
I guess my focus is whether these days appear acceptable to the state auditor. Because the last thing we want is that they come back next time and find out that, hey, these items still remain, right? But again, if the state auditor is okay with these days, then I have no further comments or concerns.
Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps your written document could allude to that report that you just held up in this recovery plan. Because when you say 50% of actions, you're referring to the actions recommended in that report, I think.
Yes. Okay, I've got that one down, but you want to refer to that initial risk management evaluation.
I presume that's your template, what you're going to work from.
That the implementation of that is this loss cap action plan, which is referenced, but we can refer to both because the risk management evaluation gave us the universe of things needing attention. The loss cap gave the top 5 most critical priorities and all of them listed underneath that as well. But I can certainly refer to the documents.
And perhaps you might allude to establishing priorities in the document. I don't know if it's already done or not. It wasn't clear to me.
It is.
It is? Okay.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
Good suggestions, all of them. Thank you for them.
Well, I guess we can move on to item number 5. Very, if you don't mind scrolling down a little bit for us, that'd be great. Addressing the excessive costs currently incurred providing fire and emergency medical services. Does anyone have any comments?
Well, I already actually made this comment. I'll just say I think data analysis is needed, the fire department workload. I'll make a short version of it this time. And I think I sent it all to you, what I meant.
Okay, let's move on to item number 6, which is to prepare financial analysis and evaluate both the short-term and long-term financial implications of significant spending decisions.
I was hoping our city manager could elaborate on this item.
Yeah, be happy to. This is an area within our budget that is pretty big problem needing attention. Made worse in this year by a couple of factors. Revenues are off, and expenditures are way up in this area. Our normal responses for EMS, normal calls for service is in the range of 20 or 21 calls per shift. During the pandemic, when it peaks, we've been running north of 40 calls per shift. And just to keep up with demand, you call 911, we come. We've had to let some parallel support structures, some emergency contract with Care Ambulance to double our resources in that area. So where we normally run 3 rescue ambulances, we've been running total of 6. Council ratified a contract for care ambulance to provide 2 more ambulances, and we've been running a 4th out of city. The overtime rate is during the pandemic is sky high.
I think we're on item number 6.
Oh, I thought we were on fire.
I thought we moved on. Am I wrong?
Yeah, we have moved on to
Okay. But thank you for the great.
Oh my God. I was going to tell you about the Laverne study, and we're doing one just like it, and I have by the dates. Sorry, guys.
Dave, I just said I wasn't going to repeat everything I said earlier on this subject. That was it.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
For a sec.
Yeah, I'm all embarrassed. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going to let somebody else speak about their suggestions on number 6.
Oh, I wanted to hear your thoughts first on just what it meant. I wasn't really sure what it meant.
Well, when we talked to the state auditors, they wanted to make sure when decisions are made at the city council level that we're not just looking at next week or next month, but we're looking at long term. Most of our expenditures are in services, are in public safety services, and so they were especially aware and critical of expenditures, financial implications of spending decisions for labor contracts. But it applies to everything that we do. They wanted us to do a better job of evaluating impacts. So here we say we're going to come up with a template. We're going to do some staff training around that, and we'll include that template and that analysis in all city council reports that have financial implications.
Just out of curiosity, how did we come to the threshold of 75,000? Is that based upon some sort of policy somewhere?
I don't think the state was focused on the small things, although in a couple cases they were. But mainly they were interested in the high dollar contracts, given the position of the city. And I mentioned, with revenues being down and expenditures being up, we think heading into the next fiscal year, we'll be fine through this year. And we're really hopeful that we get a lot of state and federal reimbursement, but we probably, even with just a rollover budget, we're going to be looking at a deficit of $3 or $4 million. So they wanted to make sure that on the big ones, we don't make any mistakes. We can't afford to make any more mistakes in our financial decisions.
So moving forward, when we see an agenda report for an item coming up to City Council, will we expect to see the financial analysis and summary in that agenda report?
Yes, we'll and I say here we'll have an evaluation template, and that'll become a part of the staff report process.
Thank you.
They thought we weren't doing a good enough job in that area.
Any comments for item number 6?
You want to talk about the fire again? Because I was all spun up on that one. All right, moving on.
Moving on to number 7 now. Implement a formal process for development of reasonable budget projection.
Yeah.
So I do have a question on this one. How are we planning to do a more reasonable projection for the budget? So more specifically, what are we going to do differently from in the past?
I think let me start by saying that I think our budget projections have been on the revenue side within 1%. I think Robin has done a really excellent job in this area. I know the state is big on wanting us to articulate what goes into the thinking. We recently got a pretty thorough report about the property tax. We did a press release about how it's up by 3%. Countywide, it was up 6%. But they want us to provide more backup, more detail, more explanations at what goes behind those numbers. So we're owning that one and saying we will review the accuracy of our projections and I guess explain what's behind the numbers better.
And how do we come up with asking community development director to be the support? We're not thinking about getting an actual finance position that's for the budget.
Yeah, a lot of these revenues, and that one referred on the support side to how are we tracking building and planning activity. We just took a snapshot of how we did in all of 2020, and building activity is now, thanks to the fees being raised, we've moved it from being a cost center to a more of a profit center. But they want to have all the departments more directly involved in tracking building permit activity, and that feeds into the general fund revenues there.
I was hoping that there would be something here about there would be a report to the city council. In the good old days, we used to have something like a second quarter report that would say our original budget projections for revenue and expenditures were X, and now we believe that they're going to be Y, and maybe a third quarter report. That was kind of traditional, and we haven't been necessarily seeing that sort of thing. And that this would be the time, for example, for the second quarter report. And that should be part of what I call the action steps.
Well, we hear in the action steps, we talk about annual and mid-year. I want to look into quarterly, so thanks for that suggestion. I don't have more of an answer now, but I'll look into that.
Because there's always an adjustment process that needs to take place during the year.
And the report that you're referring to as the second quarter report, Jim, is what I always refer to as the mid-year budget adjustment, and we have been doing those.
I'm just saying it needs to be here as part of the action plan, formal process.
I think it is. It does say mid-year, but maybe we need to expand on that. And you used the word quarterly, so I'm going to look into that.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. So let's move on to item number 8, which is to meet and confer regarding negotiations of employee union agreements.
Yeah, this one looks like we forgot to finish our thought. It just says begin, meet and confer process with all labor groups, and then blank. So we need a little more meat in here, for sure, as much as is allowable given the sensitive nature of the information.
Well, the state did say that our benefits were generous.
Yes.
So maybe we could quote from the state audit. We are now under contract with 8 out of 9 unions, which is a big step for this city. That's major progress in terms of labor relations. And we have begun with 2 of the unions, and council's given direction authority to begin negotiations with the other 7. So we're underway on that. But I'll say what I can say in this report about some of the city's interest in that negotiation process. We're not able to say here we're going to slash pay and benefits, but we can talk about some of those being overly generous.
So we could maybe mention, the report talked about comparing us with others, using data of other cities. So maybe just kind of put that as a bullet point that we're going to do that step.
Good point, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia. Anyone else? If not, we are moving on to the last but not least, item number 9, which is to improve the internal purchasing processes / enforcement to reduce susceptibility to waste and fraud. So within the state audit report, my understanding is that it appears that there were some instances where supervisors may have approved that certain expenditures without documentation. Mr. Carmody, would you elaborate a little bit on that observation in the report?
Yeah, they looked at a number of purchases. They came forward with a couple things that I think made the point. One of them pertained to a credit card that had been increased to $7,500. The vendor that was doing the repairs didn't want the city's purchase order, so we needed a credit card to get the vehicle repaired, but it didn't comply in the way that it was handled. It didn't comply with the policy of the city that it was raised, but it wasn't just raised temporarily, it was raised permanent. The other one was a purchase of 5 laptop computers at the start of the pandemic. We went to Best Buy and got those. They're big on wanting everything to be bid, and so we decided to step back from it and review all of the city's purchasing policies. We're probably going to need to do some work around those. And then the second part, which is separate from the review of all the purchasing policies, was this business of using the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting, which will enable us to speed up project delivery and will adjust some of the limitations.
Thank you, David. So it sounds like it's more of an issue of having certain gray areas within the existing purchasing policy, as opposed to employees not following the policy. Is that correct?
Robin, can you speak to that? I'm not sure that we're looking at material mistakes, but I want Robin to talk to that for a minute.
It wasn't a material item that they looked at, but there was an instance where they asked, we have a form that's filled out when we increase the credit cards for an individual, and we could not locate the signed copy, even though we believed that it was signed, but we couldn't produce the document. So somehow it got misfiled or lost somewhere. And so that was their main issue. And you know, I some of that stuff just happens from time to time, but that's no excuse. We're going through, and as you guys know, I've been without a purchasing manager for over a year now. We just filled that position recently, and I'm having our new purchasing manager go through all of the credit cards. I'm reviewing who has a credit card, if they really need a credit card. We're trying to reduce the number of credit cards so we can get a better handle on it. I'm having the policy sent out to all of those card holders, and I'm devising a sheet that they're going to sign and send back to finance saying, I have received and have read this policy, and I am responsible for following it. And that will go into this folder that we have for the credit cards.
Robin, Colleen Rosati, how many credit cards do we have currently out for staff or department heads, et cetera?
I don't know the exact number. I think it's probably less than 20.
Do all department heads, or you don't know, have credit cards?
Not all the department heads do have credit cards.
Okay. So in your planning of, let me rephrase this. Is there a list of do's and don'ts as to what you can use the credit card for versus not?
Yes,
and will each
policy I'm sending out for them to reread and refresh and make sure that everybody who has a credit card knows what the policy is
Okay.
and it signs a sheet saying they're responsible for it. So that'll give you accountability.
Over the years, I've looked into the credit card use, and I've asked for public record requests, and I know that some folks have higher limits than others. I think one person has about 25,000 as a limit, where others may have 2,500, etc. How do you determine who is going to get those high limits?
So it depends on the position that they're in. For example, fleet is one of them. That I don't know of anybody who has 25,000. I'm not saying there's not, but I'm not aware of it. But the higher limits, like if you're getting a fire vehicle, sometimes we have emergencies with police vehicles, fire vehicles. We need to get them back in service as quickly as possible. They will sometimes use the credit card to purchase parts, or take it to a vendor and get those things repaired because of the need. So it's determined in that manner.
So in reviewing the financials, I noticed that, well, there's been a couple different ways that we've used the credit card payment, and now it's automatically deducted from the Wells Fargo account.
I don't think
on
so.
An auto pay. Huh?
I don't think so.
There's an auto pay that comes through. And last time I checked, it was about $11,000. But on that report, it doesn't say what card. It's just a lump sum. And that was one thing that I questioned when they started doing the auto pay. This was before you. Is how do you know that the proper documentation has been received and that it was even approved? Because let's say I put in a charge on the 20th of January and the cutoff is the 25th for payment, and it gets lumped in that payment. And the approval of that might not have been received by you or whoever, purchasing manager, whoever does that. So that was always a concern with the checks and balances that I had for the credit cards with the auto pay.
Reconciliation every month of those credit card statements for each individual and make sure that we have all the appropriate documentation. But it's to the timing of when I'm not aware that the credit card is paid auto pay.
Okay, next time I'm there, I'll show it to you.
Let me offer this. We're trying to get suggestions from everybody, so I appreciate that one. But if we say here we're going to review current purchasing policies to determine compliance with best practices, maybe I could add the thought of credit card use, current purchasing policies, including credit card utilization.
Yeah, what can be used and what can't.
One of the things we are, Dave and I are discussing is getting rid of the credit cards.
Yeah.
Solves the problem.
I know I can tell you I don't have one. This is an area where cities get into trouble, and so we need to just make really sure that we're
Is it possible to have limits like transaction limits or day limits?
We
They
do.
have those.
We do? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think, this is just based on experience, especially during the pandemic, it's become so necessary to have those cards available because there are so many emergency purchases, and I don't want to call them all that, but it's like, oh my God, we need another tent, or oh my God, we need something because, we're going to help someone with vaccine rollouts, whatever, testing, whatever, something's always happening. And, obviously I'm not an expert on the day-to-day of the city expenses, but it seems like we probably need to keep at least a couple around. But I really don't think this policy I wasn't too worried about, because I remember when we reviewed the purchasing policy the last time it was updated, and I think it was pretty good. Your last purchasing manager did a good job with that, and so it's just kind of enforcing again that we practice what we preach, right? If it's written down, the auditor expects to see it in practice. And so again, it just goes to having the support, the staff available to make sure that happens, that the paperwork is there, etc.
And one of the heavy users of the credit card is our IT manager.
Yes,
And oftentimes he gets
we need
discounts
it. Yeah,
on his purchases, which he wouldn't get if he didn't pay with a credit card.
yeah. One of our big, we have that issue too in our agency with IT, especially. They're always needing cables and stuff. I opened a business Amazon account, and that way it still goes because it has workflows built into it and it's free. So, you assign them an account and, it's linked to a credit card, but everything's already in the system. The receipts in there, the order, the approvals, it's all in there. So whoever needs to see whatever, you just log in as the administrator and boom, there you go. Cost centers, GL codes. It's beautiful. And free shipping.
Yeah, yeah, we use Amazon.
Anyway, my comment on this one is unfortunately something I bring up every year, which is I think we need an action plan to make sure that the purchases are within budget. There's always a bunch of accounts at the end of the year that are way over budget. And I was told in previous audit committees, this was probably before your time, Robin, that there was controls in the computer to stop it. Well, that isn't working because
Well, controls in the computer, Jim, we're required not to go over in the maintenance and operations of a budget. That's not, so it excludes personnel, because
no,
we have to pay people. But in the maintenance and operations, the system is set to not go over budget not at the line item level, it's in total, because we can go over in one line or the other and still stay within budget. And I know sometimes you're talking about it's gone over in total, and they have, they told me in the past that they did unlock those accounts. We did not do that this year. We were making people go back to council and get appropriations and add to purchase orders. And we added to our fund balance this year.
okay, well, at least when I looked at the year-end report from last fiscal year, which is my source data, there was quite a few accounts, and I'm talking about in total, not just specific line items, where there was more spending, not salaries. This is non-salary accounts. So
and the other thing that you have to understand is by the time it gets to finance, we're bound to pay those bills.
oh, I know that. I'm talking about this should be on the action plan to put in a system to deal with it. That's all.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jim, Marsha, and Colleen. So based on what I was hearing, can I make a suggestion to update the action plan number 1? In addition to just reviewing the current purchasing policy, can we possibly revise it to review current purchasing policy and credit card use policy and ensure that all the city staff are closely abiding by it?
We
Yeah,
can.
got those thoughts.
It's
Thank you.
already underway, and I'm sure that the purchasing policy, that, like I said, it was a fluke. It was just we couldn't find the signed document. But I'm still updating all of the things, looking closely at who has credit cards and what their limits are.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions for the last item? Well, if not, then I guess we can. We are done with this review here for this plan. Do we have any other new business on the agenda?
Our financial audit status.
So I can speak to that. I received a draft of the financial audit report yesterday. And I'm in the process right now of writing the management discussion and analysis and doing the transmittal letter, getting the covers, and finalizing that report. The single audit has not been completed yet. They're working on it, and it's due on March 31st, which is usually they get it to us shortly before that. So it's almost done.
Any issues we should be aware of at this time?
So there's a lot of management letter comments that are going to be in this current year's audit. The auditors have looked very closely at the state audit and are mimicking their findings, so you'll see it in both places.
Robin, I have a question. One of the meetings that we had previously, I had brought up the contract with Rams.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, I had to go address something really quick. I don't know if you were talking about that right now. But isn't it up for renewal? And if so, are we going to send out RFPs for other?
So I have the RFP sitting on my desk, and it's just a matter of which thing I juggle right now. I'm trying to get the financial audit done because I want to be done with 1920. And
when is their contract up? Was it January or June? I lost track.
It's technically up June, but that's for that audit year. So they have been here this year doing the 1920 audit. So it's kind of a little bit different than other contracts that expire on a certain date. This was a 5-year contract to do 5 years of audits. This is the 5th audit they've done.
Okay, even though in theory it expired in June, they're just completing contractually.
The contract did not expire in June. They are contracted to do 5 years of audits.
Okay, no matter when that is.
And you can't do the June 30, 20 audit until the following fiscal year. It's different than other contracts because of that time lag. You know, we have to close the books, we have to get ready for the audit, and then they do their work and we go back and forth.
So when we did, going back to, it may have been 2016 when we did this, when we reviewed or looked at firms, I don't know if we had an audit committee then, but I know that we did have a committee that sat on the interview process. I know I was on there, and I think a couple council members were on there, and then a couple finance people, community people were there. Will we do something like that again when we're choosing an audit firm? That's a question.
I hadn't thought that far ahead, actually.
Okay. just a question, just a thought. And you know, when I was thinking about Rams, and in some of these comments that the state auditor made, especially where it said control weaknesses, I'm not sure the proper verbiage. Oftentimes when they do the testing, Rams does the testing, you know, they pick a certain subject and they test it to see if it's secure. I'm surprised, or is this not common, that they didn't pick up on some of the findings that the state auditor did?
I don't know that I can speak to that.
Okay.
Well, let me just say, they basically waited until the state finished theirs and then echoed all the things that the state found. They've been here for 5 years, but this is the first year those things have appeared. So,
well, that's kind of my
it's not
question.
wrong for them to do this, and they look at different things every time they come, but not all that impressive.
Okay, well, that was kind of my question.
Risk assessment, yeah.
Is that if these things popped up, it seemed like in previous meetings with them, with all due respect, it was kind of nonchalant. Like, yeah, we didn't find anything. It was all good. We tested this and that. And then you get an audit like this that kind of hits you in the face and says, wait a minute.
Well, if I'm going to be completely candid with you guys,
sure.
I think that most of the stuff the state found was not very serious. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, that, you know, but there's some benefit that comes from some of the things, and some of the things we already knew and were working on. But I agree with you, Robin.
Yeah, and we've been working on things, you know, since we got here, and the council's been very supportive in helping us get a lot of those things passed. But we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of this overnight.
Right.
I would just like to throw in, as you're thinking ahead, Robin,
Yeah.
to remember my comment about hopefully this year the audit committee will get the report before the city council does.
I'd like to be specific about that. You alluded to a draft audit. This committee should see that before it's finalized. That was traditionally done.
I don't have an issue giving you guys a draft copy, but I can tell you that they're not going to change anything in it. You guys can't change numbers or anything. You can't change groupings. You know, the audit is the audit. I don't have an issue with it, but
Or even though if they make a mistake.
Yeah, I actually had quite an argument with Rams before you were here about something that was, I think, factually wrong in the audit, and it ended up with the partner quitting. Because I was really unhappy about it. So that's why I'm pushing about this particular issue.
Yeah. Colleen and I think, are really good at finding all the accidental spelling errors too. When you stare at it too long. And you know, because this is a public document and it gets posted on the website, Federal Clearinghouse, we want to present our best foot forward here. And I don't know, and just based on experience, again, it's always been customary. It goes to the audit committee first, and then it's presented to the city council.
that's fine. But then it'll probably push it past March to go to the city council. That'll be the latest I think that we've ever been.
Unless we would schedule a special meeting just to get the presentation on that, like the week before. I think we've done that before, like a week before the city council meeting.
Yeah, we've actually done that before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's not complete right now with all the parts in it.
I know. Yeah, we're talking in March.
And then you would probably have to get the single audit at a different date. Because I doubt that they're going to get that to me much before March 31st, and that has to be to the clearinghouse before that date. So.
Okay. Any other comments? If we don't, shall we come up with our next meeting day now?
There was one other item on the agenda, which was the financial reports.
The expenditures.
I just want to mention to everybody that this meeting is supposed to end at 8, and because it's a Zoom meeting, I'm not sure how that works if it cuts off for the live feed.
Oh, why I saw 8:30. Where did I see 8:30? Was it 8?
It was 8.
Okay, I saw 8:30 somewhere. Just expenditures, just a quick little 2 cents from me. What I looked at already, and I didn't go through every single page, just a quick little analogy. There are certain things that are already over budget, and we've got about 7 more months of this budget. And again, it's something that we've already talked about, but litigation fees on page 5, it was over. On page 23, there were some legal services over budget, 245%. They budgeted $25,000 for that particular department, and we're at $36,000. So we've really got to reel that in. But we've already discussed that.
I've already talked to the department head about that, and there's some money in some other funds. And when I do the mid-year, I'm going to be transferring, but I have to get council approval to do that because there's a line item basically in some of the other litigation funds is pretty low. And I will ask, because I've been very careful this time not to increase appropriations in the general fund unless there's a corresponding revenue for some other savings somewhere else, because that's the problem that we've had over the years that has decreased our fund balance. So, I mean, I have been diligent about it to make sure that we're going to come out of this year better than we did even last year.
The other one to look at is capital lease payments. Those in many departments are over. And then also there on page 38, item 3125, community enhancement. There is some expenditures on there, but it's not budgeted.
Yeah, so because there's one person in the police department that's in community enhancement, I guess is what it's called, but it got budgeted totally into where Mylan's group gets budgeted. I need to do that also, is break that out and make sure that we take care of that. The money,
And then
not increasing appropriations, we're just redistributing.
Okay. Yeah, because that had no budget whatsoever, but there are numbers there. And then something that I saw that's over budget also is vacation buyback in quite a few of the different departments.
Yeah, we don't have control over that, Colleen, unfortunately. It's very difficult to budget for that because not everybody takes it. It varies from year to year. It's one of the benefits here that have been negotiated over time, and it's in the personnel part of it. It's one of the things, yeah, I know it's an issue.
Yeah, just really quick, HR department, vacation buyback had a budget of $3,000 and it's currently at $7,134. So it's over budget 237%.
Yeah.
That's just one department. There was a part-time salaries on page 13, item 5112, that's over budget 187%. I'm not sure if that was PD. Budgeted $27,000 and it's over by $23,000. On page.
What are you looking at?
I was looking at the expense report for November.
Let's see if I can find it right.
And that was page 13.
I wrote it down. I'll look at it. I don't seem to be able to find it.
Okay. I have it written down too, Robin. So I can shoot you this real quick. I'll do it tomorrow. And then League of Cities.
Say, Robin, you did a good job because most of the other departments are way under budget.
Well, that is true. I just highlighted things that kind of stood out that were over budget, and there's 7 more months to go. So it's like, whoa, what are we going to do if we're at 200? In fact, this one right here, service contracts on page 13, but it's budgeted 2,100. And we're over 756% on that one. Eek.
Because it's a small amount, the percentage is really high.
So that's all gonna, and then League of Cities, this is interesting, and maybe Dave could add a little input to this. The budget amount was $30,944, although we only spent $1,400. Why do we budget so much for League of Cities? Just out of curiosity, or maybe you can enlighten us.
Where are you, Colleen?
It was on page 2, item number 6081. League of Cities, 30,944. I guess no meetings, no trips, no nothing for League of Cities. And expenditures was 1,443. So we're only 4% of that used budget, which is good. I just wondered why that gets budgeted so much. What are the expenditures that come out of that 30,000? Almost 31,000.
Biggest portion of it is the annual league dues. The league is probably the preeminent organization in California for legislative tracking, training, etc. In terms of the other league conferences, we try and send, for example, 1 or 2 planning commissioners to the Planning Commissioners Institute every year. and a director to their conference, their respective conference for their department, police or fire or city clerks or whatever. This year, we've pretty much been shut down. So conference season came and went without us going because they weren't holding them.
Sorry to hear that, but that is good news that we didn't spend all of it.
Yeah, we're pretty aware of who goes to what trips and try and keep that to an absolute minimum. We look at those pretty carefully.
And then PD just had overtime a little bit. Not a little bit. Budgeted was 47,000 and it's at 213%, so it's over 54,000. And that's on page 28.
And they have to fill them with overtime, so the salaries will be lower, and salaries and benefits, and the overtime's high. It just happens.
Yeah. Again, I'm just looking at things that are kind of out of character and already over budget. I'll share my list with you.
Yeah, if you would. Thank you.
My question has to do with unfunded liabilities. In previous years, the budget, in fact, when the budget was adopted this year, the budget for unfunded liabilities for pensions was in each department. Not my dog. The line items seem to have disappeared in the printouts. There is one line item listed under finance for like 200 million.
I moved it all because, the big 200 million is the bonds that we issued for the pension liability, and that's how it got recorded. But the other line item you'll see there is for the unfunded liability, and I didn't want to leave that in every department's budget because I didn't want them to look at the bottom line and spend that money.
I understand why you would not want them to spend money that wasn't really available for them to spend. But the part that struck me as weird is the account totally disappeared. I thought when the city council adopted a budget that the line item would remain, even if the budget was adjusted and turned into zero. It still would remain because the city council did adjust budget, and I couldn't see any record of the city council budgeting the 180 million.
We did a budget amendment.
Pardon me?
We did a budget amendment for that. I can shoot it to you, not tonight, but I'll get it to you if you want that.
Yeah, I would. I couldn't find it.
Okay.
But the issue is, I would still think the original line item that was adopted by the city council would still be listed, even if it had been adjusted to zero.
It is, Jim. It's on page 20 of the budget. I moved it to central services, as I told you, because I didn't want, it's 11,870,931. I took it out of every department's budget and moved it there, and you'll see that there's zero spent out of that. I didn't want them to be able to spend that, and we can do that between departments as long as it's not increasing appropriations.
I guess I'm not being very articulate. I don't have any issue with you reducing the budget to zero in the departments. That isn't what I was talking about. What I was talking about is that the line item completely disappeared in the department. And to me, it still should be shown there, even with a budget of zero. There needs to be basically, because the city council adopted it with money in it. And the account doesn't disappear just because you reduce the budget to zero. And I say,
may have been run with, you click a box that says suppress zero balance accounts. That's why. It's not like it disappeared. It's just not on your report.
Yeah, well, I guess I made my point. I'm not going to.
If I run these reports without clicking the ones that have zero balances for both budget and actual, it's going to add thousands of pages to this. And I can do that if you'd like.
No,
But I can show you in every department when next time you're in City Hall, if you want to stop by, or I can shoot them to you. I can show you that the line items are still there. They haven't disappeared from my financial system. They may not just be on these reports because of what I just explained.
yeah, because it's really hard to find what I refer to as the trail, and when you compare the adopted budget by the City Council with what appears now, it's hard to track. Anyway, that's it. I'm not going to keep repeating myself. Okay.
So just a little courtesy time check. We're right at 8 p.m. now. So if there's no more questions or concerns, I think we should move forward in scheduling a date for the next meeting, if nobody opposes.
Scheduling the next meeting, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, how about April 28th?
I would like to have a meeting so that we can look at the draft audit report, and I believe the finance director said it will be earlier than April.
You would like to look at what again, Jim? Say that again.
The draft audit report, our official audit that's going to be submitted to the City Council and the state.
You mean the response?
No, the actual
Annual audit.
The annual. It's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. That's the official name of the document. That's the official financial report for the city. And I believe that originally that was the only reason the audit committee existed, was to deal with that report. And its duties have expanded since then, but still that's a core duty. And if we don't ever look at it, it's kind of important, really, for me.
What would be your
When
suggestion?
is that, Robin? When is that due?
Well, I'm going to be working all weekend to finish it. And then I have to send it back to the auditors, and there's usually a little back and forth. The single audit will not be ready, probably until March, but the financial audit, then we're ordering covers and doing all the binding and everything. But I think that, I think they're done with their review. And, but I'd like to get all the pieces together before I send you a draft.
We do end of March.
I think that's doable. And then as soon as I get it, I will send it to you so you have ample time to look at it. And I'll send it along with their letters and.
So am I hearing the 24th?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, the 24th, as I look at the calendar.
At the meeting, are you going to want the auditors there?
Usually, if we have questions about their work, somebody needs to be here to answer them.
Okay. And I'll let them know the date too.
So March 24th at 6 p.m. or would you like earlier?
6 is good.
6 is good.
Yeah, 6 I think is the best time. Okay, so March 24th.
Okay, so the next meeting will be on March 24th at 6.
So, Robin, will you think about how we're going to interview the new audit firm?
Yeah.
And let us know.
Yeah, first I'm going to get the RFP posted, and I'll let you guys know when those are going to be in, and we can talk about it.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. All right.
So I guess I'll make a motion to adjourn the
Motion
move-
to adjourn.
I
I'll
didn't hear
second
you.
it.
I'm sorry. A motion for what?
To adjourn the meeting.
I vote yes.
Thank you guys for all your time tonight on this.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you guys. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay.